Hey, everybody, and welcome to And All Shall Be Well. My name is Megan Rohrer, and I am your host. Today, we'll be talking about ways that you can find wellness in ways that balance you out. The Reverend Dan Tisdel is someone who works a very public job as a pastor in a church and who is very committed to community in their life and work. And what that means is that they see people all day long. Their focus is visiting people when they're not well or encouraging people when they are in need of a cheerleader, and doing that in a communal setting. And that setting happens to be a faith community, but the conversation that we have transcends much further beyond that, as we're not really talking about faith much during our conversation. We're just talking about ways that with all that you do, you can explore your passions and live your best way in the world and feel engaged with life, particularly how to keep doing these things when the world's a bit upside down or a little bit chaotic. And I think some of the answers that Pastor Dan gives about how he cares for himself might not be your answers, but they're really interesting to listen to, and I hope you will take a listen.
Hi there. I'm Pastor Dan Tisdel. I am the fairly newly installed pastor of St. Luke in Sunnyvale, California. Previously of a pastor in both Roswell, New Mexico, and in a little town in the mountains of Colorado, and a longtime friend of Megan. At this point, I could say longtime friend, right?
Yeah, it has been a long time. What are some of the intersections of how you identify, or ways that you would describe yourself with some adjectives to folk who have never met you before?
I'm jack of all trades, master of none. I've got a lot of too many hobbies, basically.
Well, let's name a couple of them. Would you say you identify as Lutheran?
Oh, that kind of intersection. Let me back up. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
I'm Lutheran. I'm an ELCA Lutheran, very progressive. I am a cis white male.
Do you identify as a woodworker?
I built an 18-foot cedar strip wooden canoe, and I've built furniture from tables and dining room tables and desks, chairs, all sorts of things. Almost everywhere I've lived, like half of my furniture in my house I built because I can. So for me, that's actually a really it's an important part of my own self-care, which I kind of will talk a little bit about here. But I'm at my own sort of taking care of myself and having something that's just my own thing, but also I can combine it with taking care and thinking about other people. I make my Christmas gifts, for instance, most years, and sometimes it's something simple like salt and pepper shakers, or this year I made to-go coffee mugs with people's names and epoxy and stuff and wood, and it's fun, but it's also my self-care because I have a way of I have to disconnect a little bit. For me, being able to, I think the way that I need to take care of myself is to not be thinking about everything, all the problems in my life, all the stress in my life. And so for me, the ways that I take care of myself the most are the times that I can not have to think about that stuff. And woodworking, I partly have to do that because if you think about that stuff, you'll cut a finger off. That's, I have all 10 of my fingers. So I think that's part of it. You just get, I love getting to the point where I'm a little ADHD, and I have that hyper focus thing, right? Which a lot of ADHD people have. And people say you're easily distracted. I'm like, I can be easily distracted, but I can also be the opposite, where you can't distract me. Like, it's almost impossible to distract me. And that's actually a lovely place if you're not like if you have a partner, if you're not offending a partner or something else you have to attend to, or I can be so into something that hours will pass and I won't even know. And that's, to me, lovely when I can give myself that. Specifically with woodworking, I've told people at this church and also on my previous call that a way to know how healthy I am, how good I am being at taking care of myself, is to ask, how much time have I spent in my wood shop? Because if I haven't spent any time in the week in my wood shop, I'm probably too much in my head and too much stressing about things, right? If I've spent at least 4 to 6 hours in my wood shop, I'm probably having a real good week, and sometimes more when I'm behind on my Christmas presents or whatever, So there's a few ways that, for me, it's about. I think sometimes when we think about self-care, we think it's about pampering ourselves or taking vacation time, and that's lovely, but it doesn't necessarily disconnect my brain. And so that, when you say sometimes you need a vacation from your vacation, like sometimes you take days off and you come back and you're more tired and more stressed. Was it really self-care, right? So um, it, I'm actually taking a vacation next week, and my fiance and I have gone out of our way to say we're not, outside of where we're staying each night, we're really not scheduling much. We'll do stuff, but we just kind of want to, if we want to sleep in some morning, if we want to just not do something, or if we want to on a whim go drive somewhere, that gives us the flexibility to do that. It doesn't, and when it gets overscheduled, then you have to think about it, then you stress about it, then you come home more tired than you were before. So I think sometimes people's perceptions on what is self-care is not actually helpful, right? So
Well, one of my favorite things about you is that you have like these really robust ways that you do wellness. Whether or not you feel well at the end of them can be a whole podcast in and of itself. But like, I think you're someone who is willing in your like non-work time to go far afield and like do things that are in an outside space, including writing, including acting, including I think just engaging in other fields that are not what people might imagine when they think of like the pastor hanging out at the local church.
yeah, one of the I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things for me, in college, I did a lot of theater in college. Didn't do any in high school, and multiple times, including recently, I've had people say, "Oh, you do acting? We want to jump in and do this show," and I'm like, "No." And it's actually, ironically, self-care is wrapped up in all of it, right? Um, no, because I just started this new call, and I know that if you're in a show, it tends to be all encompassing. It's 5 nights a week plus days plus other things. So um, I missed out on being able to be in a production of Les Mis because of that. I'm like, no, I just can't. And recently, a production of Jesus Christ Superstar I could have auditioned for. I'm like, I've been in that before. I would love it, but I'm aware of my own limitations too. But when I found myself doing on my previous call when I lived in Roswell, I got connected with the theater because I had attended a few shows at the theater, and was thoroughly unimpressed with not the show itself, but especially the sets and the props. They basically had the same exact set for 3 shows in a row. And I went to somebody and I said, I mean, the show's fine. It's entertaining, but the sets all look the same. And they said, "Oh, do you have experience with theater?" I'm like, "Yeah, I have a degree in theater. I've done 50 shows maybe." And they said, "Oh, you should come be involved." I'm like, "No." Like, because I know as soon, it's like I can't do anything part way, right? So I said, "No, I'm going to be involved." Then there goes any social life I might have had. And they said, "Well, what would it take?" And I said, "Well, every actor has their roles that they want to do before they die. And they said, well, what are your roles? I'm like, so I listed a few. I said Caiaphas from Jesus Christ Superstar, the voice of the plant from Little Shop of Horrors, or Don Quixote from Man of La Mancha. And they said, we're doing Man of La Mancha this coming fall. And I said, no, you're not. You're just telling me that to try to get me to come out. Well, they were, and they did, and I auditioned and I got the part. So then once I was in, then I spent a lot of time. I was in 4 shows over 3 years, but I designed and or built about 8 sets out of 12. And it's the same thing as the woodworking conversation, right? It's great to have help, but I actually liked the days that I would, because with my pastor schedule, the times I can be there versus the times that other people could be there to help me were very different sometimes. So I'd show up at like 7 p.m. on a Thursday night and work on a set for 5 hours till midnight. And they allowed me to do that. And it is self-care because I've had this stressful long day. Now let me go creatively figure out how the set's going to go together and play with things on the stage. So it was kind of fun to have that I think creative outlets are in general are a good way of embracing your creative outlets is a good way to kind of take care of yourself. One thing that my fiance and I have noticed, we sort of accidentally have fallen into doing puzzles together, and puzzles have a funny way of you can't think about anything else when you're trying to figure out where does this piece go, right? So we did a puzzle on Christmas Day, and it was way bigger than we expected, 2,000 piece, and it took us a while. But it was nice because it was a way of, we could be worrying about other stuff now, but it's Christmas. And so we spent all this time poring over these tiny puzzle pieces, putting this puzzle together. And it was just a great way to sort of disconnect and not stress about all the other stuff in life that we have the rest of the year to worry about. So I think there's lots of ways that you can do that. Like I said, for me, it's about, I personally tend to be an overthinker. And so, I actually have been guilty of, I'll admit in this public space that I when I'm worried about a conversation I may be having in the near future, like, okay, I'm going to meet with this person and I'm really stressed about it. So I role play the whole conversation in my head. Well, I'm going to say this, and they're going to say, well, I don't agree with that. And then I go through this whole thing. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a horrible conversation. And then when I actually have the conversation, it never works out the way I thought about it. So why did I do that to myself, right? So because I overthink every possible, and oftentimes I get pessimistic in that, right? So my own self-care is let that crap go, right? Just live in the moment and expect the best rather than expecting the worst, and don't overthink it. So for me, self-care is always about, how do I not overanalyze? How do I not overthink stuff? And for me, it's especially you doing things with my hands, woodworking, but even other things like playing with a puzzle, anything where it requires your focus and it takes the fog of all the other stuff away. That's self-care for me, right? Yeah.
Well, so you also serve, you're not just somebody who's sort of like doing important work in the world and figuring out how to care for themselves. It's like literally your day job to provide care for other people in all kinds of diverse circumstances. Everything from wanting to figure out how to not be grumpy at work to like going through really deep grief and tragedies. And I wonder if you have any wisdom you want to share from what you've kind of gleaned in doing that work for such a long time that you think might be helpful for folk who are listening, particularly those who are like wanting to care for their own wellness and keep going in a world that's kind of complicated and chaotic right now.
Yeah. I feel like as a pastor, it's such a privilege and responsibility that, really, ideally, the job is about accompanying people, right? The job is about being with people at at their highs and their lows and everything in between. And I take that, very seriously. I'm just thinking about, I had someone who was very seriously ill and went to the hospital and was with the family, and they were in surgery and then ICU, and visited a couple times over the next few days. And I finally came visit, and they were out of the medical stuff and were able to talk. And this person said, well, I just feel uncomfortable with the pastor visiting. And I said, well, that's nice, but I'm not here for you in a way. I mean, I am, but I'm not, right? I'm here for these other people that don't know how to cope, right? I'm here to provide support for them. You've got a team of doctors and nurses that are taking care of you. So I think maybe part of the lesson is there's always a team of people out there that wants to care for you, and we're not good at accepting. I don't want to say accepting help, because it sounds like we need help but it's more about accepting relationship, accepting people, letting people care about us. Right? We're bad at that. We're all bad at that. I'm bad at that, right? We all tend to be, even when we have relationships, we tend to be fiercely independent, right? So I believe very strongly we are meant to be in community. Whether that, of course, in my perspective, I think church community is an easy community. Not easy for everyone. I get that, right? I mean, some people, right? But church community is such an easy way to be part of a community that you may not be by birth, but it's people that at our best, we're designed to care for each other. That's what we're about. And that's all we're about. I know that sounds weird to say. We're about worship and we're about, social justice. Yeah, we're about that stuff first also. But number one, we're about caring for each other and caring for the world, and love your neighbor is the fundamental thing. Your neighbor may be sitting next to the pew, or maybe living across the street, or maybe somebody in another country, but it's about love your neighbor. We have to start there. So I think part of so much of what you're saying is, I think in my lifetime, which is, I'm not that old, we've gone from, I really believe we lost a lot of community in general. When I was a kid, we had block parties once a year, and people I didn't talk to the rest of the year we'd get out, and some guy I never met would hand me a burger and a Coke, and my 10-year-old butt would sit down in the middle of the street and eat a burger with kids I didn't know. Like, now we don't know who our neighbors are half the time, right? And so I think there's a lot more people that are sort of lonely, that are sort of, looking for a community. And I said, church, I think one of the best things to do for yourself is find community, whatever that might be. I realize I'm sounding a little like I'm talking both sides of my mouth. I say, I'd like to do these things alone, like working on set alone and doing woodworking alone. That's self-care for me. But I also think if we're struggling to find ways to cope with the difficulty of the world, having a community that is built to care for you, and doesn't have to be a church. Of course, I'm biased for church, but I have a good friend who is not a churchgoer and says, their best friends are people they know from the gym. And they go to dinner together, and they take care of each other. They call each other. They do things together. And they met at the gym. Like, I think if you're intentionally going to community anywhere, and community, we have this, for some reason, we've developed this unhealthy thought that we can do everything on our own and we don't need anybody else. And my neighbor is somebody that might be taking advantage of me, or might be dangerous, or something like that. And while that does exist, I'm never going to discount that. I think we're missing out on how we're created to be in a community, and to take care of ourselves, we need to take care of each other. That might be my profession is doing that, but I can say, I'm going to give an example of my mother. I have no idea. My mother likes to watch the things that I do, so maybe she'll see this. I don't know. But she has, over many, many years at our church, the church I grew up in, sort of taken on, like, she's sort of, I don't know if she like makes a list, but there's people at church that she takes care of. She knows this person doesn't drive, for instance, and they have regular medical things. And she'll go out of her way to say, well, maybe we can help out and get you to your medical appointments. Or this other person has some other issue. And so this person is lonely. And so she kind of adopts people over time. And she has, 5 or 6 people she kind of takes care of. She and my stepdad take care of. And that's just what they do, because they recognize that we can't, live in a vacuum. We have to care for each other. And I really believe that, yeah, there are lots of things we can do for ourselves by ourselves. But the first thing is identifying community that where we can connect with others. And I think part of caring for ourselves is being able to care for others. Right. So.
Yeah, I see that in the work that you do. I see that in the ways that you're kind of in your professional way of being in community in kind of St. Luke's, in your professional kind of reaching out to other people who do similar collegial work, but then also in your private life, finding different groups of communities that you're reaching out to and caring for folk. If people want to connect with you and figure out how to be in community with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can email me. I don't really do Twitter, but I could do email. My email is bigmantisdel@yahoo.com. I'm 6'7", 220 pounds, in case you wonder why the big man comes from. And I'm here at St. Luke Lutheran in Sunnyvale, and can be found there or wherever.
Thank you for listening to our conversation. I'm always reminded when I am talking with Pastor Dan at how lovely it is when people are able to dedicate their lives towards community and to do it in ways that is seeking the best for other people. That's one of the ways that I try to live my life, is to do what I can for others and to forgive myself as often as possible for the things that I'm not able to carry anymore. So I hope you found a couple of ideas, or just at least are excited that you passed a half hour of your life thinking about wellness and without worrying about whatever might be weighing you down in other parts of your life. I give a big thank you to everyone who has been listening, particularly those who have left positive feedback and who have helped provide support for this work on Patreon as subscribers, and in all the ways that people do likes and thumbs up and subscribing and all of those things. I see this community as a community that is rooting for each other. And if you need someone who can root for you a little bit more in your life, check me out on social medias. And just in general, know that I am rooting for you and caring for you, and here to remind you each week that if you don't make it to the gym today, there are so many ways that you can seek wellness. And if you do make it to the gym today, there's a lot of ways you can seek wellness that are above and beyond with that. And know that you're not alone if things feel hard sometimes, and if you need to restart sometimes. I'm so grateful for you. Talk to you next time.